I will keep my camera on. And my overhead camera here is where you see my canvas space. So as you can see, I have prepared my space with just some newspaper. So while we're painting tonight, I'll be checking out the ShopRite deals for the week. Perfect. Kill two birds with one stone, huh? Those of you just hopping on, I'm Carly from Steam to Go. We're going to paint a beautiful bushel basket. What do you want to call it? Bushel of apples, I guess. A beautiful fall painting tonight. Should be super fun. We're not looking for perfection here. We're just going to have fun. It's a nice fall evening. Great night to do a painting. I will also tell you that if you would like to grab a drink, I will not be judging you at all. You want to grab, like, make it your own sip and paint situation, all for it. I rarely get to do adult classes, so this is very, very fun for me, out of the box a little. Usually do a lot of kids' birthday parties and after school classes and camps and things like that. So it's very fun to do an adult event. I have got my canvas laid out here, as I said, over a protected space on my table. I have also got this plate. I think you all were given a plate. Now you might not want to use the plate. It's up to you. Some people like to use the plate to mix their paints around on to blend the colors and things like that. I like to, but you also have these individual souffle cups of paint. So you can mix right in the souffle cups. But for instance, if you wanted to have any clean white, which we'll need a little bit of clean white at the very end to make the highlight on the apples, you may want to keep some clean white in the cup and put some of it onto your plate for when we're mixing like a lighter, when we mix the lighter yellow of the straw basket. I will show you a finished product. I don't have any that I made here, but I happen to have, and I thought this would be good for inspiration. I happen to have one of this painting that was made by my now 7-year-old. She was 6 at this time. So if that gives you any inspiration or any comfort at all in your painting skill level, know that this painting, this exact one right here, was done by a 6-year-old. So it absolutely is not that difficult of a painting. You can, I think, I'm biased, of course, she's my child, but I can clearly tell that this is a bushel of apples. It's got the wood grain background. You can clearly tell what it is. So if a 6-year-old can do it, you certainly can do it. And for a little more inspiration too, this was done by, I guess she was probably 10 at the time, my 10-year-old last year. So you can see the different skill levels at different ages. Us all being adults, I think, doing this painting, we should just be that much even better. Although I will say my current 11-year-old is really an excellent painter, so I'll give her that. We also have 2 brushes that we put in the bags for you. You should have a slightly thicker brush and a slightly thinner brush. We'll be doing the whole background with a slightly thicker brush. And that's what we will get started with now. So we also probably gave you a small cup, like a clear cup like this, a 9-ounce cup. You can put a little water in that. We won't be adding a ton of water just because we don't want it to, take forever to dry and be super water. This is acrylic paint, not watercolor after all, but it's nice to have to wash off your brush every now and then. I'm going to be dipping mine in my water from time to time off camera. You won't really see that. So I also grabbed a paper towel for nearby. So we didn't put that in your bag, but if you have a paper towel, a napkin, something like that nearby, just so you don't get excess water that you can dip it onto. So again, beginning with my thicker brush, I'm going to start with black and white to make a little bit of a gray. So I am going to use my plate to kind of show you how little black it takes to make a decent gray. If I take a little bit of the black, probably took even more than I needed, and quite a bit of the white, it's going to make a nice soft gray. And everybody's will be a little bit different. The beautiful thing about painting on Zoom is that we aren't even seeing each other. So there'll be no judgment from anyone, no comparisons. It's a lovely thing, right? So if your painting comes out not as you expected, well, no one on here saw it, so you're all good. All right, so I've got like a nice medium gray here. It could be lighter if I wanted, it could be darker if you want, totally up to you. We're just looking for a gray toned wood grain look in the background. It's as if your bushel of apples is up against like a wood pallet. It gives it a nice farmhouse feel. And I've made enough of that paint that it's going to pretty much cover my canvas here, because making the same shade again, if I were to run out of this color, would be difficult. But I am ready to just start painting, and I'm going to paint the long way up and down. For almost every painting I ever do, it seems like they are side to side, because I'm always painting like oceans or skies or things like this. So it's kind of refreshing to do one where it's an up and down motion instead, because that is the way that the wood grain is going to flow for this painting. So I just started out on my left side. You can start out on the right, doesn't matter. Middle, because this whole thing is going to be gray for right now. Now, if at any time you feel like your paint's just pretty thick, or it would help to add a little water to your brush to spread it out, even it out, you can certainly dip in the water. Again, we just don't want it to be too watery on our canvas. All right, so we're just painting this away to get it to be a nice solid gray. And then we're going to come in with some different tones, a little bit more white and a little bit of brown. I'm not sure if it's like a palette in the background or like a shiplap wall, what exactly it's supposed to be, but it gives it that farmhouse look. I am going to dip a little in the water, spread this out a little bit. Oh, my water is muddy already. And we're reusing water, I think, that I painted with earlier. That's okay. The background of this is super imperfect because it's wood grain. So we're not looking, again, not looking for perfection. Just looking to cover the space with that gray. Nice long strokes, all in that up and down direction. And if I'm ever moving too fast for you, feel free to interject. I should mention that this is, I believe, being recorded just in case some people couldn't make it to the live class. I believe your library director is going to send it out. So hello to everybody watching it not on the live. Glad you could join us whenever you're joining us. Waiting for the next day when your kids are in school, totally get it. My kids are currently at soccer practice, so I've got a quiet house. If you hear a commotion in a bit, it means they came home. But hopefully they won't be too rowdy. I am probably going to have to make more gray because it's pretty much gone on my plate. So to try and match that same shade, I'm going to remember that I only took a little bit of black and quite a bit of white. Now, just remember that we'll need a tiny, tiny bit of clean white when we're done later. So keep that in mind as you're mixing up your gray, that you'll need a tiny bit of clean white later on for the highlight of the apples. Make sure you leave a little bit at least that's clean. Okay, mixing that up. We could have given you even thicker brushes, I suppose, for this whole background. The thicker the brush, the less time it takes, huh? But that's all right. Of course, if you had a thicker one at home, you're welcome to use your own materials as well. Don't know how into painting everybody is. I think it's always fun. I really just got into it as I've started working for Steam to Go 3 years ago. Never would have considered myself an artist. But my friend Nairi owns the company and she got me into it. It turns out it's not as difficult as I thought. Although that being said, most of the paintings that we do are for kids' parties, so they're a tiny bit more simple. This one is not hard though, as I showed you with the beginning samples. If a 6-year-old can do it, you definitely can do it. I definitely can do it. All right, I am getting mine covered. I only have about 1.5 inches left over on that side. Might have to make a tiny bit more gray. I feel like the paint was pretty thick tonight. It's not as humid as it used to be. Weather really does interesting things to acrylic paint. So I hope you all are getting there with your background. Hard to tell where you're at with no cameras on, or you're watching it later. But that's okay. If ever you get behind, since it is being recorded, you can always go back to the recording later, which is nice. If you miss a step, obviously for right now, we're just painting the background gray, so you're not missing anything. You know exactly what to do. I do want to mention, as you finish up your whole background, that if you have enough of that gray that you made, and you don't have to compromise that last bit of clean white, you are welcome to paint the edges. We always encourage our painters to paint the edges of their canvas as well when it's a gallery wrapped canvas like this. This is a 12 by 12 canvas, by the way. I don't think I mentioned that in the beginning. This is a 12 by 12 wrapped canvas, because if you were to hang this up and you approached it from the sides, say like in your hallway, you would see those white edges and it would look unfinished. You want it to look as though you painted it when it was a flat canvas piece and then you wrapped it around this wooden frame. You can see how you can even see some of the streaks in mine where it's not solid paint. That really actually helps to make it look like the wood grain. So it's nice. Those little imperfections are going to help us in the end with this painting for sure. So in a normal painting where I wanted the solid background, I would go back and paint over that. But because this is going to be a wood grain look, I'm going to let that be exactly what it is. Those grainy, streaky looks. That makes sense. For the sake of time and paint space, I'm not going to paint my edges right now, but what I'm talking about, if you can see it on the camera without me holding it too close, is these edges here. So this is like, if you were to look at it from the side when you hang it up, you would want that to still be colored as well. So I'm not going to worry about my edges right now, just for the sake of time and paint. But if you've got a decent amount of clean white still without making extra gray, you can certainly do the edges. And especially if you're watching this on the recorded and you can pause or whatever, you're totally welcome to do the edges. Okay, so I've got this very streaky up and down. You can tell that I have painted it up and down motion. It's going to help us look like wood grain. I am going to dab a tiny bit into my white, only with the edge of my brush. I'm not doing much. In fact, I'm even getting rid of some of what I just got on my brush, just so that I can make long strokes all random places in my painting to make it look like there's extra streaks. With a light hand, I'm not doing that with a heavy stroke. That just helps to add that streaky look. So I think it looks pretty good, like streaks now, right? Like wood grain. And then I'm going to decide how many planks of wood I want it to look like there are in the background. Now, some of these lines that we're about to make it look like planks of wood are going to end up being covered up by our bushel of apples. Picture the bushel about right here on your painting. And then there'll be a couple, like maybe 1 or 2 apples that fell out of your bushel over here with some grass at the bottom in the end. But picture your bushel taking up about this much space with some apples at the top. There's going to be planks of wood. So you have to think about it. Are they 2x4s? Are they even thinner? Like how much of this space are we taking up? And how much of it do we want to look like is a plank of wood? Now for this color to make it look like the lines, you can either do brown or you can do like a darker gray than what you made your wood grain. I'm going to make mine be a little darker gray, not pure black, not just black, again, with just the edge of my brush, same brush, because it has a nice flat edge. Not pure black, but with a tiny bit of white. I want there to be some differentiation between our darkest color and our lighter color. So I'm going to make mine, I think I'll make about 3 lines down mine. So I'm going to make my first one right about there. And again, I'm just keeping a super light hand for it. And you can kind of tell that I didn't even let my line be very thick towards the bottom because that's all going to be covered up with bushel of apple anyway. Now, the importance is not on having an incredibly straight line. You don't have to worry about it being incredibly straight. You don't have to get out your rulers, your meter sticks, none of that. Just try to keep as steady as you can. No one will notice that the line is not perfect. Incredibly difficult to draw a perfect straight line. But if we were to get our rulers out right now, we'd probably get paint all over them because this is still a little bit wet. So best to just eyeball it. Ooh, that one had a little more white on it than I anticipated. Best to just eyeball it and try to make it as straight as your wavering hand can go. There we go. So I have got 3 lines going down mine now to show the planks of the wood. I just noticed that my overhead camera froze, so I'm going to give that a second. There we go, it's back. Okay, my overhead camera froze. I don't want to get ahead of myself. I have got my 3 lines separating the planks of the wood. So you can kind of tell now that it looks like wood grain, right? Or like planks of wood, like a pallet standing on its side. Now pallets also are going to have these funny little shapes in the wood, and they're going to have little nail marks. So again, with only a tiny bit of paint, either in like a dark, dark gray, you can do it in the black or you can do it in the brown. I'm going to make just a tiny little nail mark at the top of each plank of wood. So it's like there are 4 planks of wood here for mine. And then I'm going to make some tiny little imperfections. Now the imperfections are kind of like C shapes or backward C's, but I'm making them on each plank, and I'm making them with a very thin part of my brush, the very edge, like the straighter edge, with not very much paint on my brush at all. They're kind of, some of them are almost like question mark shape. Backward C's, imperfections in the wood, scars. I like the way that's looking. Looks like our wood's just a little bit beat up. If anybody's ever been to like a boarded brush or one of those fun places where you make wood signs, these are the like imperfections. This would be that part of the class where you get to just beat on your wood. That class was so fun. I went to one of them one time, great time. You get to just beat on the wood with like a mallet and things like that. Let your aggression out. Painting is a little bit more gentle than that, but pretend this is that part of the painting. You can make some little imperfections on your wood. So there we go. I've got some wood grain look. And now I'm ready to wash off my brush. I'm washing it off very thoroughly. So if you weren't caught up yet with that part, that's totally fine. You're welcome to finish up with your wood grain, make it wherever you're happy with, whatever color you're happy with. I'm actually really liking that I have some streaky looks to it there. It just shows that the wood is weathered a little bit. You can see it a little bit better in the light like that, huh? Weathered, and you know, maybe the imperfections on the wood are parts where it burned a little bit, or I don't know, just got smacked around by chains and things. I don't know. So now I have my brush cleaned off. So go ahead, take a second and clean your brush off. Grab a sip of whatever you're drinking. And we will get moving on to our bushel of apples. I do encourage you that whenever you're happy with the background, to just stop and let it be. We always have to remind, especially kids at parties, to just stop and let it be. Less is more always with painting. Less is more. If you get to a point where you just keep adding and adding, you're going to eventually add something you wish you hadn't added, and it gets too busy and it gets too crazy. And it also takes the paint just way longer to dry. We don't want that to happen, because then anything that we need to add on top of the background is going to get all muddled in those other colors. So we're just wanting to keep it simple, keep it at what we made it, and be happy with how it came out. So again, I'm going to go back to my plate, which has that big messy part where I put my gray color, where I was mixing my gray color. But this time I'm going to mix a nice color for the bushel of apples. Now, the yellow I have given you is very bright. This is called chrome yellow, but it's a basic yellow that can be mixed for all the, all the colors that would involve yellow, orange, like a nice coral, a nice green, comes out really well with this. We are going to make it more of a straw color. So we need this yellow and we need a bit of that brown. So you can play around with this on your plate, grab a bit of the yellow. Again, it's going to take a decent amount of this, since the bushel is fairly large, and then grab a bit of that brown. This is the brown. I believe this is burnt umber brown that we gave you. My painting is pretty well dry now. It dries pretty fast unless you really glopped on the paint. So I'm going to grab a little bit of that burnt umber and add it to my yellow. Well, let's just see what happens if I like this color or not. I have a feeling I grabbed too much burnt umber. It's going to turn a little bit green. But let's just see what it's looking like. Yeah, a little bit green. I'll add a bit more yellow and see if I like it better. It just involves playing with it to see what looks best. If you have a lot of clean white yet and you want to just lighten it up, of course you can add white. But remember, you will need a tiny, tiny bit of clean white at the end. We won't need the white, however, for anything else. So if you do have a decent amount of white, go ahead and lighten this up with white. See, when I painted on the white, it's not bad actually. In the circle itself, it looks kind of gross and yellow and greenish. But on the plate, when I flatten it out, it looks pretty good actually. It's like a mustardy straw yellow. So I think it's pretty good. Now I'm going to show you just the outline of the basket at first. And then we will fill it in once we're happy with the shape. I'm going to add a tiny bit of white with mine, lighten it up a little bit, just a tiny, tiny bit. Get a color you're happy with there. Now, I have not gone apple picking yet this year, so that has yet to happen for me, my family. We definitely need to. I've been pretty busy with a lot of birthday parties on weekends and soccer games, and fall gets busy, but I hope there are still apples left. I heard a bunch of places are already done for this season, so hopefully up in New York State, they have some good stuff left. I am going to find the midway point of the edge of my canvas, so about halfway up. I'm going to find that point, and then I'm going to find the middle point of my canvas, right about there. The top of our basket or bushel, whatever you want to refer to it as, is going to swoop in a very wide U shape from that left corner to the center mark. See how it swooped in just like a big wide U shape. Right now, it kind of looks like it's going to be a pot of gold because my color came out a little bit more gold than straw, in my opinion, but that's all right. So there's the edge of my bushel. And then I could draw the other edge right here, but you're not really going to see it much in the end. See how I made that little edge looking like it was going off the corner. You're not really going to end up seeing that very much because it's going to end up having some grass at the bottom here. Our bushel is sitting in some grass by like a barn, by this panel of wood. Let me move all my stuff so you can see my whole canvas. There we go. But whenever you are happy with your shape, if you aren't happy, of course, with the edges that you made, you can tweak them a little bit while you still have fresh paint on there. But I think I'm pretty happy with that. I think it's going to be a pretty nice bushel shape. And I'm going to go ahead and start to paint that in. I'm still going up and down with my paint stroke, kind of following the curve of the bushel. Now there's parts where I had imperfections in my wood under there, so I might have to go thicker with my paint over top that, and that's fine, just to cover that up. Yeah, this color that was looking kind of icky green on my plate is coming out better on the canvas, so I'm happy with it. It's a mustardy gold. So I am just painting that all in. And then we will make some lines on that bushel too, to make it look more like a real bushel. Once we have it all colored in. It's time to dig out all the fall recipes too. After I go apple picking, I usually make pies, crisps, tarts. Trying to think what else I've made. Cheesecake, there's an apple cheesecake. My goodness, that one's good. I think I would just eat the apples raw, but no, I bake with them. Anybody has any good recipes, send them my way. All right, so I'm getting my basket all colored in. I might have to grab more of those colors. So to make that shade again, it's going to be a little tricky. It's always tough to eyeball it, how much exactly you're going to need to paint any given section. And of course, it has that gray behind it, so to cover it all is another challenge. That you're never sure how much paint is going to need.
Excuse me.
Yeah.
What color was it that you used merged to get that, what you're doing now? The yellow and the
yellow and the brown.
brown.
Just like
Okay,
burnt
thank you.
umber brown. Yeah.
Thank you. I'm a little behind.
Oh, you're good. Yeah, you're good. I feel like I initially added a little too much of the brown because I thought it was looking green on my plate. But it comes out much better on the canvas than it does on the plate. So I made a little more of that color and I'm painting mine in. Now I should mention that we also do team building type exercises for corporations. If anybody works for a company and is looking for a unique team building thing, especially teams that aren't able to work together in person, we've been doing some Zoom classes, painting classes with your team. You get to pick the painting. We can even ship supplies if your colleagues don't live in the area. So do reach out to Steam2Go on our website or steam2gousa@gmail.com, where the 2 is a number 2 in that instance. And we can set up corporate events. They do paint nights, super fun. I think one of them even painted a Converse shoe with their like logo on it. It was really cool with the company logo. I didn't teach that one, but I remember seeing it. It was really neat. So we can do some custom things as well as give you our own ideas. We have some really pretty like lighthouse paintings or beach scenes, you know, just depends what you're in the mood for. I have a couple of decent ones behind me too. This one's really pretty. I don't know if you can see it well, but here's on my screen. This, I would call this one Harvest Moon. I think we call this one. This is a pretty fall one with pumpkin and all the leaves in the background. It takes a little while, but it's also not too difficult when you break it down to do that painting.
I have a question. Are you supposed to see the leaves? I mean, the lines from the palette like that you're doing? Like I see them on yours, or are we supposed to be able to see them, or are you gonna cover them?
So I'm gradually covering them. Yep.
So you
I-
won't see them at all?
Right. So you wouldn't see the lines behind the bushel, right? You'll see them obviously everywhere else, but yep. We don't want to see them otherwise, yes. So I am adding paint gradually. I'm kind of letting it dry and then adding paint to cover. The light color, it just depends how dark your color is. The light, bright yellow takes more to cover, of course. So it just depends how dark it is. But we will be making some lines down the bushel too, so don't worry too much about it. We're not going to stress too much about if we see the lines through, because the basket itself will have some lines on it. So we're just kind of working our way with it. This way everybody's gets to a chance to catch up here too, whatever step we're at. I hope that everybody that wanted to sign on did. I didn't see any sign on requests, but you'll always have a chance to rewatch since she's recording. That was a great idea to record. For anybody that couldn't make it tonight, we also do paint nights as fundraisers for schools or other organizations. So you guys are in Maywood. I don't think we've done one for Maywood schools yet, for those of you with kids in schools. But we've done them for Hawthorne, Gloucester, Emerson. I'm trying to remember where else I've done the deliveries too, where we set up the registration, we come around, we bring everybody's bag of supplies, very similar to the bag that you picked up at your library. And then I believe it's 20%. I want to say it's 20% of the proceeds go to your organization.
Where are you located?
So we run a summer camp out of Franklin Lakes. But we,
Just there yesterday.
oh yeah. Yeah, we run a summer camp out of, we rent the Franklin Lakes United Methodist Church on Polis Ave. So that's where we are for most of our activities. And people can rent the space too for birthday parties and things like that. But mostly lately we are on the go. Over COVID, everything became to go. So we bring everything to people and do things on Zoom, or we do a lot of parties in people's backyards, or at, we've done a bunch of activities at the Wyckoff Environmental Center. It's not called Environmental Center anymore. I forget what it's called. Wildlife Center, the James McFall Wildlife Center, if that sounds right. So yeah, we're kind of all over the place. We're based out of Allendale though. I mean, all our supplies and things like that in Erie, where we typically work together, is in Allendale. I'm in Ramsey physically at my house right now.
I know that
We're all
too.
in
Know all of
Jersey.
those.
Yeah, so we're all in North Jersey here, right? Yeah, we do a lot with the Ramsey Library as well. Mawa, got a lot coming up with Mawa Library.
Oh, I always do both of those.
Yeah, they have a nice library for sure. I don't know if they've done an adult painting yet, Mawa. They choose a lot of stuff for their teens and kids. I think we have a kid's scarecrow watercolor painting coming up there next week. I'll probably teach that one. That one's in person, I think. Some of our libraries we're seeing are starting to do some outdoor things if they can, or if they have the space for it. But typically kind of all over the place. So I have got a line or an imperfection thing where I made in my wood that you could see really clearly. I'm sure you all can see it too. I'm not going to worry about it right now because I can always hop back with it later with dry paint, but I can see it pretty well. So we'll see how it comes out after I do my lines of my basket. But as everything dries, I could come back with just my smaller brush and fix that. So if you have anything like that where you can see like one of those wood imperfections or the lines, I'm definitely not going to worry about these lines too much because I'm kind of going to work with them as my lines in my basket. But if you have a funny mark like that you made as one of your little imperfections in your wood, don't worry about it too much. We can come back later with a thin brush and carefully fix it when everything's more dry. I'm rinsing my brush off, not necessarily worried about thoroughly cleaning it, because again, I'm going to use the flat edge of it to make these lines in my basket. We did give you a small brush too, which if you feel more comfortable with at any point, don't feel like you have to keep using this one. I just kind of like the flat edge that this one gives me for making the lines in the basket. And the lines in the basket are going to be brown. And I'm just putting it on the tip of my brush where it's the flat part. So the very first part I'm going to make is a copycat of the rim of the basket. Copycat meaning just about a half inch, close to an inch below the top of the basket. I'm making a copycat line. And I can even outline the edge of the basket too, although we're not going to see that much once our apples are up there. But it helps it to feel more complete. So I just have a nice brown inch of space or so right there. The next space where there's going to be another cut into my basket to make it look more like a basket is about here. So about maybe a third of the way up the basket. And this one's going to be a tiny bit wider. And it's going to go more straight across. So again, I'm trying to use a steady hand as much as I can, but not worried too much about a perfect line. And then a copycat line about an inch below it. Perfect circles and perfectly straight lines are probably the hardest things to paint. So we are not worried about perfection. So that's where the lines of my basket have come in. And then similar to how like the rounded shape of a pumpkin would be, or a beach ball, or in this case, our basket, I'm going to make lines that come down and they curve a tiny bit to help show that roundish shape. And they stop, of course, at that gap space and come down again. And then there'd be another one right about here. It's going to be pretty straight. And come down again. If ever you don't have enough paint on your brush, feel free to go back and grab a little more and go over your line again. And then on this side, there's going to be another one. So I was thinking I was going to follow those lines that you can see through, but when I started doing it, I didn't feel like they would flow right. So that's okay. Probably better that they're offset from the plank wood anyway. We can change our minds, right, as we paint. Go over my lines a little bit more. Okay. And once you're happy with your lines, take a minute, go over any other imperfections. Ooh, that helps. See, as my paint is drying, you're not seeing those quite as much. That's good. Ooh, but I got too much brown on my brush now. It helps over there anyway. And then we are going to add some little dots in that basket shape as well, I think. Oh, there we go. Thought my overhead camera froze again, but it's all right. We're gonna add some little dots in the wood as well. So maybe now I will switch to my smaller brush for the little dots, or you can always flip your brush around and use the back of the handle if you want to get a perfect circle. Just remember that it's there, that otherwise you're going to get it all over your arm and stuff. So you might want to have your paper towel handy. I'll just switch to my small brush for this part. Again, with the brown. So just like we made the lines in the basket, I'm just going to make some dots between every plank. They're just little tiny dots. The smaller and more simple, the better at keeping them good round dots. And then dots here in this area as well, in between every plank. Reminds me of painting a treasure chest, very similar. Similar idea. And then I'll put my small brush back in the water. Give everybody a second to kind of get to that point. If you have more of the yellowy straw color that you wanted to cover up, feel free. But mine, even though you can see it a little bit, isn't looking too bad. It should be dry enough also on the edges for you to pick it up and maybe look at it from a distance and say, can I see those lines coming through? Is it bugging me? If it's not too much, then you might just leave it. It's totally up to you and how much it's bugging you that you can see those lines in between. We're all at different levels of how much we care for perfection, right? I got one daughter who's a total perfectionist and one who could not be more opposite. And then we are ready to move on to our apples, which is the primary reason we're here. I believe I'm going to start my apple shape with my thinner brush, which I just cleaned off since it had those dots of brown in it. And I've got this nice bright red color. I'm going to let it be bright red. I'm not going to change it. If for some reason you don't like how bright it is, you could add a teeny tiny bit of the black or the brown. Up to you. I think I'm going to let my apples be nice and really bright. I'm just going to outline a few first. I think I'm going to end up with probably 3 or 4 at the top of my bushel and maybe just 1 at the bottom, probably just 1. So I'm going to start with 1 kind of coming off the side here. And remember that apples are not perfect circles. You know, you can barely see that probably on screen because I'm just making the outline for now. That's the outline of 1 apple. And then the next one is going to be sitting pretty much like right with it. You don't have to worry too much about the bottoms of them because you wouldn't really see the bottom of it. It looks like it's popping out of the bushel. So there's 2. Then I'm going to give it a little space and have a 3rd one here. Don't worry about perfection with your shapes. You can always change the shape before you fill it in. But they're all about the same size, similar in size. And then I'm going to come down to this area right next to the basket and put 1 on the ground as well. So this little guy fell out. All right, so once you're kind of happy with the shapes of them, you can begin to color them in. And then it's up to you, of course, if you want to switch back to your bigger brush to fill them in, you totally could. I think I'll keep my thin brush because it's fairly big once I really lay it on its side. A thin brush is nice that way. It's like a thin tip to make details. But then once you kind of lay the bristles down, it's actually fairly thick. At least most of them are. I'm not sure if we gave you all the same size or not. Anybody doing this with like a spouse or a teenage kid at home? Be a fun activity if you could both sign up. I don't know how hard it was to get signups at your library. A lot of these things sell out at my library, I know, or not sell out, but you know, run out of registrations. I know we added a few too to the roster, so that was good. And our normal class amount. Now I might end up doing 2 coats of the red just because I had some water on my brush at the beginning and saw that it wasn't coming out very thick. And I don't want to see that gray underneath. And that's okay. You can, and you can always go back to do the second coat later. It's not going to change the shape of anything else that we're doing. I am, however, before I paint in this last apple on the top, I'm going to come down to the bottom and paint that apple because I just remembered I'm going to want that one to dry a little bit faster so that we can add the grass. So I'm going to skip that last one in the bushel and go ahead right to this one first. So it has an extra minute to dry before we're ready to do the grass. I have a party this weekend and we're painting a horse at this party, which is really exciting because I don't think we've ever done the horse painting before. So we found a new painting to try. Oddly enough, no kid has ever asked for a horse painting. Get a lot of unicorns, but no horse. So we're doing like an outline of a horse with a sunset background. It's gonna be really pretty. Right at their home. Do a lot of backyard parties while the weather's still nice. Girl Scout events, all kinds of stuff like that. We just are full of fun at Steam to Go. Anybody has kids in the area, do keep us in mind, of course, for summer camp as well. We have a ton of fun. We're also science, of course, the A being the art and STEAM, as you can see on my shirt. So the majority of what we do in the summer is actually science camp, but we do some art classes as well, art camps. And then we always end the summer with a STEAM mashup, which is really just like whatever we want to do. That final week of summer, we do art, we do robotics, we do science projects, whatever the kids that are signed up are into. We can do a little Jurassic one day and move on to chemistry the next. Paint a mermaid all of a sudden, who knows? It's very fun. All right, so I've got my apples coming in bright red. And like I said, if you wanted to change the color, make them a little bit darker, you're welcome to. We got no green apples in this one. They're all red, no Granny Smiths. These are all like Macintosh, I think. Maybe Gala. Gala, is that how you say that? Just going over some spots where I felt like it needed another coat. Feel free to. And my apple at the bottom. They're so bright, they almost look like tomatoes right now, huh? The defining factor will be the stem and the leaf. That's how we'll know they're apples. Now you might have more apples, less apples than me, the same amount. It's totally okay. However many you felt went in your bushel, that's great. If you wanted to do them symbolically, I should have said that before, because if you're already at this step and haven't done that, or didn't think of that, you could have done them symbolically for like your members of your family or your amount of pets or something that means something to you. I always like it when people do hidden meaning things like that in art. There are 4 people in my family, so I guess this could be my family, but one of them fell out of the basket. I don't know which person that represents. Seems kind of mean, so maybe it's not my family necessarily. Okay. I think I'm pretty happy with my apple shape and color. Hopefully we aren't freezing on camera. Keep forgetting to look up at it. Busy painting. I'm gonna clean that brush off really well, because I don't want the red and the green to mix at all. That's not a good color combo. It's gonna make a gross brown. Even though I'm going for brown actually first to make the stems. I'm going back to that brown. And I'm just going to make a little stem in each. They can be going different ways. One can be a taller stem than the next. Straight up and down stem. Your call how your stem looks. Give that one more of a slanted look, huh? Maybe a little longer on that one too. I will hold it up closer to the camera too, so you can give that a better look. So I've made my stems in all 4 of my apples. Those noises you hear are my kids coming home. And you know what, while I give those stems a second to dry, I'm gonna go back and try to fill up some of those spaces on my bushel where you saw some of the color bleeding through. So I'm gonna make a tiny bit more of that mustardy brown so that I can cover that up a little bit more. Just a little bit, just to give that stem a minute to dry as well. Matching that exact color is the trick. Oh, not too bad, actually. Not too shabby, but now I have to be careful of those brown lines I put in it. That's the trick. And then this one over here was my other imperfection that was poking through there. Okay. These ones I don't see too much, especially from afar, so I'm going to leave that mostly alone. Now I'm being careful not to touch those brown basket lines. Molly. And all that will dry and you won't really be able to tell that you went back. If you are going back like me. To dry pretty evenly and it won't really be noticeable. Now I have that one line where you can tell. So just anywhere where you feel like you need to go back before we go on to the green stem and the grass, feel free to do it with the appropriate color. I'm making my basket lines again a little bit clearer with a steady hand here. And since you can actually see the edge of my basket, I'm going back to that top line with the brown again. In this painting, you did see the top a little bit more, so that's okay. Okay. I think that's looking much better. Covered up some of that stuff that I didn't want to see. I think my apples are bright enough. I don't think I need to go back to them too much to cover up more red. I could, but I want to do it with a pretty dry brush so it doesn't make it unclear. Again, starting with the one on the ground first, because I want to be able to have that dry and put grass over it in a minute. I don't want to compromise the shape of it or anything too much because I was happy with the shape. Just adding in a little paint so it's not see-through. Okay. Now, depending how detailed you want to get, you're welcome to make a slightly darker color and make your apples a little bit shadowed towards the bottom. So we would do that by making a little bit of red. And I'm going to add a tiny bit of brown to see how that comes out. Yeah, that's good. That makes it more of a deep red. So I can add that to the bottom of my apple a little bit. Makes it look a little bit shadowy at the bottom where it meets the bushel. It's not changing it dramatically, it just changes it just enough that it adds some differentiation. It's hard to see on camera, I'm sure, but I do see the difference a little bit on mine. Of course, if you already made a deeper red, this might be kind of tricky. You might have to make it quite a bit darker to add differentiation on your apple, but that's fine. Just a little shadowing at the bottom to add that look. They're sitting there not getting quite as much sun at the bottom. And then that brush back in the water. I'm going to go back to my thin brush for the leaves of the apple. Again, making sure it's really clean and really dry. And then I'm going into that green. Now this green on its own, I will show you on my plate. This is called phthalo green. It's going to be a tiny bit turquoise. It's not really a true grass green. Oh, we got my overhead camera freezing for a second. Let's get it back to where it needs to be before I show you this. There we go. See how it's not really a true grass green. It's got a little bit of turquoise tint to it. If you want it to be a little bit more true of a grass green, just add a tiny bit of yellow. A little bit of yellow will make it a little more of that Kelly green or true green. I added probably too much yellow, made it kind of lime now. But it gives it that more grass green. There we go. That's a good grass green then. So however you find that you like that green to be a little bit better. That green is actually really gorgeous on its own. If you add a little white, it gets very minty looking. It's a really cool color for the background of some of our other paintings. But in this instance, we kind of want our leaf to be more of a true green, more of a bright green. So you're welcome to mix in a little yellow to make that green. So that's what I've got on my brush now. And I'm just going to add a little leaf to each apple. Not a big leaf, not a big deal. Just a little leaf off to the side of my stem. I feel like that one needs a little bit more paint. It's not see-through. let the tip of the brush make that little pointed shape for you. It helps. And then the one on the ground, of course, too. The apple that fell from the bushel. And as with all of it, if it needs another coat, feel free to go back. Give it a little another coat of paint. Just to darken it up a little bit. I'll move my green paint off my painting there. Show you that a little closer too. So you can see the leaf next to the stem. I'm liking it. I think it looks pretty nice. I think everything evened out really nicely. And I think I'm ready to add a little bit of grass now. Unfortunately, even though I have green on this thin brush, I think I'd really prefer to use my other brush for the bristly look of the grass. I can try it a little bit with this one, but yeah, I think it's going to be too, well, I could do thin looks like that. It's up to you. I think I'd prefer to use my other one, but if you can do a slight movement of up and down with the brush, just keep, by slight, I mean keep a light hand. You don't want to press down too much. Then you can keep it going in the grassy, wispy grass look. I can't speak anymore, apparently. But I think I'd like to switch to my other brush. First, I am going to make more of that matching green though. Might make it a little bit darker than I made the leaf. So again, I'm going to grab more of that turquoisey green, a little bit of yellow green, and add it. Yeah, that's nice because that's a little bit darker. Let that be a little bit darker. Now, even though that brush has green on it, I'm going to switch to this slightly thicker one, which still has red all over it from my apple. So I got to clean that off. Do not want the red and the green to mix. Cleaning that off really well. That thicker brush. And I'll go back to that green. I'll just get the tips of it so I can really make it like a wispy. Yeah, that's nicer. Really just make like a nice wispy grass at the bottom. Let it wrap around the lower edge of your canvas. Of course, you can kind of make two shades of grass so that it looks a little more dimensional and real. Make one that's a little bit darker green and one that's a little bit more lime green. Mix them in and around. Using different parts of your brush to make it look more realistic. But that just kind of finishes off the bottom of our bushel. I just saw that it's kind of hard for you to see, huh? Because the Steam to Go name is at the bottom of it there. Let me pinpoint this too, if that helps at all. Does that make it bigger for everybody? I'm sorry, I didn't do that in the beginning. That makes it bigger for everyone and able to see a little bit better, huh? Or maybe you pinpointed it on your own. I feel like it's been so long since I've spent much time on Zoom, I've forgotten how to do all of these things. We were doing a lot on Zoom in the past, year and a half, but over summer we did hardly nothing, almost nothing on Zoom. It's good to be in person for a while, but we got to be thankful for technology for sure. All right, now you can kind of decide when you get to that apple that's on the ground, if you made an apple on the ground. If you didn't make one, that's cool too. You didn't have to, or if you made two, that's great. You can kind of decide when you get over to that apple that's on the ground. Do you want it to have fallen like more flat on the grass where you're not really seeing grass in front of it, or do you want to go over it with grass? I'm going to make mine look like there's a little grass kind of coming off the side, but otherwise I'm going to let it be mostly it's apple sitting there. And it's nice to make your grass tufts a little uneven, so it looks more real. More like it wasn't mowed perfectly. My grass needs to be mowed. All right. I'm liking the way that's looking. I'm gonna make one tiny little bit of more yellow grass too to add dimension. But I am really liking the way this is coming together. I hope you guys are liking yours too. I'm gonna make a tiny bit of yellowy grass. Oh, I didn't grab yellow enough, did I? I even just grabbed that straw color with the green still on my brush, just to dab it in for dimension. So it's not too solid, but it just adds a little dimension of some kind of straw or dead grass coming in with the fresh grass. Nobody's grass is perfect, right? Grass isn't always greener. All right. Okay, I think I'm liking the way that's looking and adding to my grass for sure. I just used that straw color, the same color from the basket. Great way to use up a little bit of that paint too. That was on my plate. So now I do believe I'm done with the plate. I'm gonna put it off to the side. And this is the time where you can really just look over your painting and see what you like, what you aren't happy about, and change it if you want. I think that I feel like I can see most of the details pretty well. If anything, I feel like I need to add a little more dimension in my apples. But I don't want to do too much. I want to remember my own rule that less is more, right? And quit while I'm ahead kind of thing. I'm gonna add a tiny more dimension to the bottom of my apples just to make them look shadowy. But then I think I'm happy with it. I think I'm gonna quit while I'm ahead. And just put in, oh, I almost forgot. Just put in the highlight on my apple. We got to shine up our apples a little bit, right? I almost completely forgot that last step I've been telling you this whole time to keep a little fresh white for, and now I almost forgot it. With the clean white that we have got left, that is our last step, is just to shine up our apples a little bit. So as I have added a little bit of shadowing to the bottom of my apples, which whether you did that or not, totally fine. You did not have to, but if you did it and are still working on it, feel free. I'm going to take my small brush again. Where did it go? It's covered in green currently. Clean it off really, really well in the water and with paper towel. And I don't know about you then, but I have quite a bit of paint left, at least with the brown. I have quite a bit of brown left. I don't have too much yellow left. I have a lot of green. I gave you a lot of green. And a decent amount of black and a lot of red left. So you have more paint. If you have something else to paint or want to try something at home, if you have another canvas to use, you definitely have more paint to use, which is good. And you have these brushes. So ever you're feeling creative, you can get them out. Now with the highlight on the apple, I don't want this to be too big at all. I just want it to be where the sun would be shining on my apples. The one on the ground would probably only have a tiny highlight right around there. So I am going to get my brush a tiny bit wet and then add some of that white. But then before I even do it, I'm going to brush my white off on a clean edge of my plate because I don't want it to be like full and thick on my brush. I want it to just be lightly on my brush. So I'm getting some of that paint off. For the ladies in the audience, you know, it's like wiping the mascara off of your mascara wand. You don't want all of that on, right? So I'm going to add just a highlight to my bottom apple that looks like that. It's just a little line, almost like a wormy shape. It's not much, it's just where the sun would be shining on that apple. Same for the apples up here. So you can do one on both sides or just on, I'm pretending my sun is coming from the upper right-hand corner, okay? So I'm doing them mostly on the right side. You can do another smaller one right next to it. I'm going to give this one more close to the center. And this one would be maybe over to this side. Okay, so those are my little highlights on my apple, and that just shows that the sun is shining onto my apples. They look polished, they're bright, juicy apples. And I think I am good then. I think I'm happy with the way it turned out. It's a beautiful fall painting. I hope that you guys are happy with yours as well. If you have any parts that you're behind on, you can always come back to the video once your library director is going to send this out to you once we sign off here, I'm sure. So that way you can always skip ahead to wherever we were at or wherever you left off. And if you're watching this later, again, we're sorry we missed you at the live, but it was very nice of you to participate. Thank you for having us. And I hope you all had fun and enjoy your apple painting. Thanks, everybody.
Thank you very much.
Thank
You're
you very
welcome.
much.
Thank you.
Bye.